There is nothing more important than protecting a parent's right to make the best decisions for their child. But whether it's public schools pushing gender ideology or government agencies making decisions about your child's health without you, your rights as a parent are under constant attack, and your children are left in danger. We all see this happening. The question is, what are we going to do about it? That's why we're launching the Parental Rights Initiative at the Heritage Foundation, a powerful new platform designed to unite families and equip them with the tools to drive real change. Through the Parental Rights Network, we are bringing together parents, advocates, and leaders nationwide and providing the resources, connections, and support parents need to make a real impact. If you're frustrated by the daily attacks on families, now is the time to act. Join the Parental Rights Initiative in the fight to protect our children and restore parental authority across America.
We are so grateful for the support of the Heritage Foundation. As you all know, they do so much for the social conservative movement, and their Chief Advancement Officer, Andy Olivastro, is with us today. Andy, as so many of you know him, he's referred to as the Chief On Offense Officer at the Heritage Foundation. His actual title, Chief Advancement Officer. But he is all about advancing and maximizing strategic impact in our movement, and he does that so well. He's an accomplished private sector and public sector career, including as a speechwriter for the U.S. Secretary of Commerce and the RNC chairman. I think his session today is such an appropriate blend of both his private and public sector expertise. He's entitled it Shaping the Private Sector to Serve American Families. I hope you'll join me in welcoming and appreciating Andy for the final session of the day. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Thank you for everything that you do, everything that Craig does, everything that your family does, more importantly for all of us across America. Ladies and gentlemen, as this is standard speech routine, I'm going to open up with a joke. And that joke is that I have good news from Washington. Because that never happens, right? But it's true. It rarely happened in my lifetime, in my 50 years on Earth. But what a time to be alive. Congress is cutting spending. They passed a bill to actually cut spending, and they're talking about cutting more spending. I think that's remarkable. And if government is shrinking, that means liberty is growing. Or it means that there's potential for liberty to grow. I want to share 3 stories with you today, and I think they're beautiful and inspiring stories, but the first thing I want to do is ask you a question. I know that my colleagues, Bridget Weisenberger and Brenda Hefera, led a conversation last night about America's 250th birthday, which is next year. But what did you do for Independence Day this year? I want you to think about that for a second. According to Capital One, Americans spent $15.5 billion celebrating the July 4 weekend. According to Capital One, $13.3 billion of that was spent on food and drink. And according to Capital One, total fireworks spending was about $2.2 billion. Now, I think we can do better than that. I think a future SoCon conference should have a conversation about fireworks and what more that we can do there. I think that would be very important for everything that we're trying to do as a country. But more importantly, someone in Washington and somebody else on Wall Street are looking at those numbers, and they think that they're seeing you. They think that that is the sum of what we are. They see GDP, but they see it wrong. We are not gross domestic product. We are more than that. We are God's designed people. We bought those burgers, maybe because we were hungry, but we bought them for the cookout, for the joy of family, for laughter with friends, to smell them on the grill, to spend time together. We fill up our gas tanks on that July 4 weekend, or at least I did, to be able to get to the Little League field on one side of town, to be able to drive around the detour for the town parade that we want to get back to, but to drop kids off at a track meet, and then we want to have enough juice in the tank to get to church on Sunday. But I hope you, like me, were especially able to look up into the sky on the 4th of July and see all the fireworks, and see these explosions of color, this grandeur, and this tapestry that filled the horizon. Ladies and gentlemen, that is human flourishing. That is the health and flourishing of our families. That's the true economic indicator. And the question isn't what's in your wallet, with all due respect to Capital One. The question is what's in your heart and what's in your soul. Markets provide these opportunities. This work, this chance to be with our families, these jobs, the mission to satisfy customers, Also, it instills human dignity and an earthly sense of purpose. This is the opposite of central authority, which takes away our agency, treats us all the same, not as unique individuals with gifts endowed by our Creator. And this is why we must protect and defend and reclaim our markets. Now, this brings me to my 3 stories, and these are short stories. But the first answers why I care about the American dream that was threatened and defended. The second story digs deeper into why I think you all should care, and humbly why I hope you see Heritage as a partner in this effort, because the left strategy is insidious and it's comprehensive, and we're fighting back effectively. And the third is a vision of what victory can look like, and it's a story that hasn't been written yet, but that I invite all of you to play a part in. So first, for 60 years, IBM was the heartbeat of my family. My grandfather was an IBM executive for 30 years. My dad followed in his footsteps for 30 years as a field executive. Now, I grew up in IBM's orbit. My childhood was punctuated by 8 moves up and down the East Coast before I reached 8th grade. I was born in Greensboro, North Carolina. We moved to Fairfax, Virginia. We moved to Danbury, Connecticut. We moved to New Fairfield, Connecticut. Then we moved to Norfolk, Massachusetts. And then we moved to Armonk, New York, back to Norfolk, Massachusetts. And we settled in Farmington, Connecticut. 8 schools each time I moved, a new school. Each time, boxes packed in haste. You know, that cardboard and that tape that sometimes sticks and then sometimes doesn't stick at all. I was very familiar with that all the way up through 8th grade. But each move was a testament to IBM's growing reach. We laughed that its initials stood for I've been moved, which was our lighthearted nod to a company that we revered for how it respected the individual, how it put customer service at the top, and it had an unrelenting pursuit of excellence. But that's what IBM was focused on and delivered, including groundbreaking technologies. And I know my dad was proud, very proud, throughout my entire childhood, to steward a legacy that didn't just shape our family, but it redefined industry worldwide. Yet today, IBM has become a company where the initials stand for I've been misled. My grandfather, an American World War II veteran who fought for true equality, would be horrified by the illegal and immoral DEI policies that IBM has embraced and practiced in recent years. My father and I, and Heritage as shareholders, we grieve what it has become. But what good is it to grieve? So we took action. The Heritage Foundation filed a shareholder resolution against IBM, and it made waves. The momentum started with Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey in June 2024 when he filed a lawsuit against IBM for violating the Missouri Human Rights Act. Soon after, Heritage visiting fellow Robbie Starbuck led a relentless campaign that forced IBM to confront its missteps. And then we filed our shareholder resolution. And as a last straw, which was held up by the SEC, by the Securities and Exchange Commission, even though IBM fought it, IBM pledged to dismantle its DEI programs, citing inherent tensions in practicing inclusion. Very Orwellian speak, but still. What's more, IBM agreed to change its advertising policy and its media buying policy in exchange for our agreement to pull our resolution out of the shareholder meeting. This is why this is important. The company's new policy states that IBM's media buying and content policies are viewpoint neutral with respect to political or religious status or views. IBM was part of what's called the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, or GARM. And GARM was put in where all the major brands were a part of it to promote a digital safety net to protect brand value. But in reality, what GARM was an effort to censor mainstream conservative and religious speakers under the guise of misinformation and hate speech, and we got that yanked out. Now, IBM has no business supporting censorship, and as shareholders, we have a vested interest in the long-term fiduciary value creation at IBM. Publicly traded companies like IBM respond and report to us as shareholders. Protecting religious and political views is a positive step for free speech, for religious freedom, but also for all of IBM's shareholders. So as a result of this, my father and I were happy because this is a victory. But it wouldn't have been possible without the inspiration of people in this room and here at this conference, and of course not without the great partnership with Alliance Defending Freedom and Jerry Boyer and his team. Many of you are familiar with them. But this is more than a one-off victory. This is the dawn of a corporate realignment focused on excellence and truth. So the second story is, how did we get here? What happened to make the Heritage Foundation, long known for policy acumen, for coalition building, for model legislation, What made us decide to spearhead a movement on corporate accountability? What made us decide to fully leverage the hundreds of millions of dollars that we have in our endowment and our investment portfolio? Well, the problem started over a decade ago when you saw this subtle shift among business leaders. Speaking from my own experience, I was in corporate America, and I was invited to ring the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange in 2012. Now, this is 18 Broad Street in New York City. This is Wall Street headquarters, with its grand facade and the colonnades, 1 block from where George Washington took the first oath of office to be president of the United States, and John Adams to be our first vice president. I was honored to walk into that building and ring that bell on the New York Stock Exchange, but another bell went off that day, and it was an alarm bell. Behind that facade, inside these ornate meeting rooms, with these high ceilings and these expansive wooden tables, I was the only one in the room that spoke to the divinity of markets. Every other person was chirping left-wing political ideology. We're all familiar with John Adams' quote that our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. What happens if we apply that to our markets? We begin to understand why the left has aggressively advanced in this space. Slipping away is the notion that turning an idea into a business and satisfying a growing number of customers and providing meaningful jobs was tremendously valuable to society. Instead, it was perceived as not being good enough, that somebody else had a claim on what you were doing. And over the years, corporate citizenship, which meant community support, which nobody is against, but corporate citizenship became corporate social responsibility. Then it became sustainability. Then it became something under the nebulous environmental, social, and governance, ESG agenda. And increasingly, corporate social responsibility became corporate socialism requirements. And the left didn't just capture our universities and our government, as we're all familiar with, they weaponized our entire marketplace. Adam Smith famously said, "It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest." But what happens when the baker is Jack Phillips of Masterpiece Cake Shop? And his benevolence be damned. The state will force him to violate his conscience or face ruin. What happens when their own interest is redefined by woke corporate boards or ESG mandates rather than serving customers and creating value? The left understood something crucial. Control the markets, control everything. They've systematically infiltrated corporate boardrooms, asset management firms, and regulatory agencies. They use our money, shareholder dollars, pension funds, 401ks, to advance their political agenda while claiming the moral high ground of stakeholder capitalism. This isn't just bad business, it's a direct assault on human flourishing. When markets are corrupted by political ideology rather than guided by merit and customer service, they become instruments of oppression. If the left is allowed to shape our markets will be akin to how they handle the reins of government. Human flourishing will fall to centralization, stagnation, and human suffering. And that is why the Heritage Foundation launched a capital markets initiative. We're not just writing policy papers anymore. We're buying stock. I told you about IBM. We bought stock in CVS, Citibank, and Airbnb, and we filed shareholder resolutions. We're prepared to do 40 or 50 more companies next year. We're fighting in corporate boardrooms with our votes and our voices because that's where the battle is being waged. We're here to support Ryan McCann and the Indiana Family Institute in their efforts to make IKEA a better company. When IKEA terminates an employee who wouldn't kneel before the trans mafia, we should all want to join forces and exert our influence. We're here to support Aaron Baer and the Center for Christian Virtue and his innovative Christian business partnership. Aaron and his team envision in Ohio, a marketplace in Ohio where business leaders of all faiths are free to compete and grow and bless their community. Why don't we spread that to all 50 states? It isn't partisan nor ideological to want America to have the most dynamic and the most durable and the most vibrant private sector. And to do that, we can't be reactive. So we start upstream and ensure our voices are heard across all capital markets and in every corporate boardroom. We as Christians must make a more forceful case for the morality of markets. We must not be afraid to say that profits are good, that markets are good, and in fact, markets produce modern miracles. Heritage is your partner in this fight because we understand what's at stake and we're putting it all on the field, our size, our scale, and our resources. 3, and final, this is the test of our age. What does tomorrow look like? The battle for the marketplace. Not low prices, but purpose. Free markets aren't only moral because they lift people out of poverty or because they improve the human condition. It's because the voluntary exchange of goods and services demands cooperation over coercion. This is essential in a civilized country. Adam Smith's observations about self-interest align with what we know about human nature. Markets require individuals to possess virtues like fairness and trust and justice, because mutually beneficial exchange requires moral behavior to succeed over time. We are meant to be free, we are meant to build, and we are meant to create. And that's the quiet rhythm of American life, the unsung liturgy of the builder, of the father, of the faithful. But today, that rhythm and that rhythm of earned meaning is being drowned out. While we're all raising families and building businesses and serving each other, a counterfeit virtue economy was forming. It uses all the right sounding words, equity, empathy, inclusion, but none of the right principles. It sounds like progress, but it rewards grievance and punishes greatness. And we're told that fairness now means sameness, that success should be assigned and not achieved, that excellence itself is oppressive. It all sounds virtuous, but it's a moral inversion. Diversity that dismisses individual merit, inclusion that demands ideological conformity, equity that erases effort and calls that justice. This isn't moral progress, it's institutionalized fragility. We're not raising people up, we're asking them to stay small. And we're replacing earned meaning with entitled identity. So here's what I believe, not just as someone who works like you all do, but as someone who walks in faith. Struggle is not a flaw in the system, it's part of the design. God didn't give us breath so we could coast. He gave us gifts to multiply. To whom much is given, much is required. And I'll prove that as a Catholic. I can quote scripture, Luke 12:48. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. That's not just scripture, though. To me, that's strategy. That's stewardship. Productivity leads to gratitude. Responsibility leads to freedom. And accountability leads to dignity. We weren't just made to exist. We were made to build, to rise, to carry the load and pass it on better than we found it. So what's the model that we follow in a culture that likes to tear things down and undermine this? I call it ABC, always be constructive. I've seen it layered across the conference agenda. Don't just cancel, create. Don't just critique, contribute. And don't just rage, build. Constructive people create families. Constructive people build institutions. Let's talk about the economics for just one more second. Not the numbers, but the purpose behind them. Every day, millions and billions of trillions of transactions around the globe. That does add up to GDP. But as we said at the beginning, we're more than gross domestic product. We are God's designed people. GDP is a number, but meaning is the measure that matters. Free enterprise, when grounded in values, doesn't just make things faster or cheaper. It helps people flourish. And the American dream isn't a subscription. It doesn't auto-renew. It has to be earned and defended again and again by each generation, by all of us in this room. So let's continue to build in our families, in our communities, in our companies, in our churches, in our character. Where does that leave us? We need a system that gives us the freedom to build. We know that markets work. It's the system that most reflects dignity and divinity. We have to make them work better. Demand better of ourselves and of the markets. Demand that they serve families. Demand that they foster human flourishing. Demand a stronger defense of them by us and others. Demand government to get out of the way. Reassert our rights to pursue happiness. If the left controls the markets, we are doomed. As President Trump said at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, making his final appeal to us and all of our fellow Americans, Quote, "For too long our nation has settled for too little. You've been told to lower your expectations and to accept less for your families. I am here," he said, "with the opposite message. Your expectations are not big enough. They are not big enough. It is time to start expecting and demanding the best leadership in the world. Leadership that is bold, dynamic, relentless, and fearless. We can do that," he said. We can do that. We must do that. We must support businesses that respect our values. We must hold corporate leaders accountable. We must show up at shareholder meetings, and we must act together. Because when we do, we don't just stop bad policies. We chart a better course for the next generation. The fight for freedom, the fight to revitalize our republic, doesn't end in the capitals. It goes straight through Wall Street and all the way to Main Street. We are the heirs of a tradition that believes in the unmatched potential of free people. We believe that prosperity is not given, it is earned, and that the right to dream, the right to build, and the right to flourish is not a gift from government, but a birthright from God. Can I get an amen? Thank you for the honor of being with you tonight. That's it. How are we doing on time? Any questions or anything?
We can take a few questions, and then we'll see y'all at the baseball field.
If you ask any hard questions, I'm going to give them to Amanda.
No. Yeah, please do. We'll come around with the mic. If you've got a question, just show us the picture.
Questions, thoughts, critiques, comments? You want to get to baseball? You want to go heckle Tony Perkins? Question in the back. What kind of media coverage did we get? We got quite extensive media coverage. In fact, it's still coming in. So shareholder meetings are fascinating, right? So in my time, I spent about 14 years consulting and then inside corporate America. And when you're inside corporate America, the last thing you want is a shareholder meeting that lasts more than 20 minutes. You just want to get that down and reduce it and get everything off the ballot and move it through. That's the mindset, at least. We got pretty extensive coverage. We got coverage in every major newspaper. IBM did everything they could to sync the ballot. What was most interesting was that when we filed the resolution, it was still under the Biden administration, so it was Gary Gensler's SEC, and they still uphold our resolution. Our resolution was for a report on all the DEI. IBM was acquiring Red Hat Strategies, was about a $40 billion acquisition, and the IBM CEO and the CEO of the acquired company did an employee town hall, and in that town hall, the CEO for IBM said, "We do hire and promote based on racial and sex and other criteria, and we compensate our executive team based on those things as well." And so that's when the Missouri Attorney General saw that as a violation of their Human Rights Act. So we did get a lot of coverage. We're still getting coverage today. In fact, most of the reporters that call us, last week we talked with Bloomberg, New York Times again, and Barron's, the financial paper. They just want to know how many we're going to file next year, but we don't tell them that yet. And we don't tell them who. But quite a bit of coverage, but more needs to be done, and more, I think, more education about how all of us can be involved. Sir?
Hey, Ryan McCann, Indiana Family Institute.
Yeah,
Thanks for the shout out.
Thank you for everything you're doing, Ryan.
Thank you. Josh Hirschberger, my general counsel, is really the one doing the legwork there of actually doing the lawsuit with IKEA, but I appreciate that. That's exciting. Separate question, though. We all saw at the Coldplay show, right, the corporate CEO and the HR person. It kind of, to me, the whole discussion of the problem with corporate America, I've seen it for the last 22 years at IFI and public policy, particularly back in 2015 when we had our RFRA issue here with Mike Pence as governor and all that. I saw the businesses really going the other way. My question for you is, the CEO and the Coldplay concert, I've seen over the course of time where I used to see a lot more corporate executives that were family people that stuck with their wives, that had kids, that were dedicated to family. And over my course at IFI, a course of time, I've seen that change a lot, where it's more like the left culturally, where it's sleeping around, it's either not getting married or not staying married. It's just kind of a personal hedonism. Are you seeing that change at all in corporate America? I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe if we could change some of that, then we could change some of the results we're seeing from corporate America attacking our values in other areas.
Yeah, great question, Ryan. Maybe 3 points. You're exactly right. Corporate culture reflects, unfortunately, some of the coarsening of our overall culture. Many of the men and women who are CEOs now came up, in sort of the worst of times across the colleges and universities that they went to and what was expected of them. More about credentials than virtue. We would like to restore some virtue ethics in business for that very reason, and I think the louder we can be, the more we can do that. In my time, I've dealt with some men and women in business who are the best of the best, and I've also seen the worst of the worst. So I don't know that it's unique in that way. We probably just see them fall a little bit further. If there's a couple $1 billion behind someone's name, the Coldplay video probably resonates more than if it was, not to denigrate anybody, a local businessman or woman, right? It just wouldn't reverberate maybe the same way. Should, but it might not. But that's why we need to be in the capital markets. And I think the other thing that we're working on doing is with our colleague David Burton, who's pretty much written the anti-ESG playbook for the Trump administration, according to Bloomberg, not quoting myself, quoting Bloomberg there, is more deregulation across financial markets and more competitiveness in capital markets so that you can see a flourishing. 99.9% of the businesses in America are small business, and we need to have small business flourishing. And if that's at the expense of big corporate business, that's okay. Well, thank you all. A pleasure to be here with you. See you tonight.